They thought he was just another easy target, a quiet man sitting alone in a diner. But when the bikers pushed too far, they learned the hard way that some battles are over before they even begin. The wind had a bite to it that afternoon as Noah parked his old truck in the gravel lot outside the Wagon Wheel Diner, a worn roadside establishment just off Route 66. It was the kind of place where time seemed to slow down and the regulars didn't always take kindly to outsiders. The open sign flickered weakly against the dusty window, buzzing with just enough life to announce the diner was still in business. A rusted gas station stood nearby, its pumps abandoned and forgotten. Noah cut the engine, took a moment to glance at the diner, and grabbed his wallet and hat before heading inside. The diner looked just like any other, with checkered floors, torn vinyl booths, and an old jukebox in the corner that hadn't played a tune in decades. The scent of burnt coffee and stale grease filled the air, heavy and nostalgic. The waitress, her tired eyes half-lidded, wiped down an already clean counter, muttering something to the cook behind her. Noah entered, the bell above the door jangling as it swung open. Instantly heads turned. No smiles, no greetings, just cold stares. The kind of stares that feel like a judgment before they're even spoken. In a corner booth, a group of bikers, clad in leather vests and dark sunglasses, paused their conversation when they saw him. Despite the dim light, their laughter dropped into uncomfortable silence. Noah remained unbothered, adjusting his baseball cap and walking toward a booth near the window. He liked facing exits. Old habits die hard. The waitress approached him, pen tapping nervously against her notepad. "What'll it be?" she asked in a flat tone. "Cheeseburger, fries, and a black coffee," Noah replied softly. She scribbled it down without looking at him, her eyes darting toward the bikers, who now watched Noah like hawks. Noah didn't engage, he just sat there calmly, tracing the rim of his coffee cup as if the room around him didn't exist. But it did exist, and it was getting louder. One of the bikers, a burly man with a thick beard and tattoos covering his hands, leaned back in his chair. "Well, would you look at that," he said loud enough for everyone to hear. "Seems we got ourselves a tourist." The others chuckled, their laughs low and mocking. Noah ignored them. The bearded man wasn't done. "Hey, buddy, you deaf or just rude?" The waitress returned with Noah's coffee, her hand trembling slightly as she placed it on the table. Noah offered her a faint smile and a soft thank you. It wasn't her fight, and she didn't need to feel guilty for walking away. And she did just that. Noah took a sip of his coffee, knowing all eyes were on him now. The room had taken sides without him saying a word. Outside, a truck rumbled by, its tires crunching the gravel. Inside, the air thickened like the calm before a storm. The silence wouldn't last much longer, and Noah knew it. The tension in the diner was palpable. The bikers had stopped pretending. All eyes locked on Noah, waiting for a response he didn't feel the need to give. "Maybe he's just shy," the burly man jeered, his lips curling into a smug grin. "Or maybe he's lost. Ain't much for his kind out here." That did it. A low, cruel laugh rolled through the group like a wave crashing against rocks. The diner wasn't big, but moments like this made it feel suffocating. Noah took another slow sip of his coffee, unbothered, as though he hadn't heard a word. He didn't flinch, didn't twitch. If anything, he looked bored. His calm only seemed to make them angrier. The scrape of a chair echoed across the room as the burly man pushed himself out of his seat. Boots thudded against the floor as he swaggered toward Noah's table, his presence heavy with arrogance. The others leaned back, eager for the show. The waitress, frozen behind the counter, looked between Noah and the advancing biker. The man stopped just beside Noah's booth, close enough for Noah to smell the sweat and cheap cigarettes on his leather vest. "Hey, I'm talking to you, boy," the man sneered, his words sharp and deliberate. Noah didn't move. He didn't look up. Instead, he gently set his coffee cup down on the saucer. "Something I can help you with?" he asked, his voice even and measured. The The question wasn't combative but polite, though the way he said it stopped the biker in his tracks for a moment. The man narrowed his eyes. "You're sitting where you don't belong. Don't you know how things work around here?" Behind him, the other bikers snickered. One of them, a wiry man with stringy hair, called out, "Show him, Travis. Teach him some manners." Noah exhaled quietly, a barely noticeable breath, but it was there. "I'm just here for lunch," he said simply. That calm was all it took to set Travis off. He wanted a reaction, something to justify what came next. He slammed his fist on the table, rattling the salt shaker. "I don't think you heard me, friend." Blake's gaze lifted slowly, locking onto Travis. In that instant, something shifted. It wasn't aggression in Blake's eyes. It wasn't fear either. No, what Travis saw was stillness. The kind that doesn't break, doesn't move. It unsettled him, though he didn't show it. A beat passed. "Back off," Blake said quietly. Not a plea, not a threat, just a fact. Travis snorted, masking his discomfort with bravado. The diner went dead silent again. No one moved. Even the cook had stopped flipping burgers. Travis's patience snapped. "You're going to learn some respect today," he said, his voice dripping with disdain as he reached out to grab Blake by the collar. But Blake's hand moved as fast as a snake. He caught Travis's wrist mid-air, his grip iron tight. Travis froze, startled. "Don't," Blake said softly, his voice still calm but carrying an edge now. A warning. For a moment, Travis didn't know what to do. The other bikers were watching, goading him silently to act. He yanked his arm free with a jerk and stumbled back a step, snarling to save face. "Think you're tough, huh?" Travis spat, flexing his hand. "We'll see about that." He turned toward the others. "Get up, boys." Chairs scraped. The air thickened. The rest of the bikers, 5 in total, rose to their feet one by one, smirking as they cracked knuckles and rolled shoulders. Blake stayed seated, watching them. No fear, no anger, just a calm stillness that seemed impossible. The waitress, trembling, grabbed the phone behind the counter. "Don't," she started, but Travis cut her off with a glare. "Put it down," he barked, and she shrank back helplessly. Travis turned back to Blake. "You've got 2 choices, pal. Walk out that door right now, or we take this outside." Blake didn't move, didn't blink. He set his coffee cup down. The sound was almost inaudible. "I'd rather finish my lunch," he said simply. Travis grinned like he'd won something. "Fine, we'll do it here then." The bikers moved in closer, forming a half circle around the booth. They thought they had him trapped, thought the numbers mattered. They were about to find out how wrong they were. The diner had become a stage. Every person an unwilling audience member. Nobody moved, nobody spoke. Even the clinking of utensils had stopped. The bikers loomed, their shadows stretching across Blake like threats. Travis, eager to reclaim his pride, cracked his knuckles and smirked. "Last chance, tough guy. Walk out now, before we put you down." Blake stared at him, unblinking. There was no shift in his posture, no tensing of muscles. He looked almost bored, and that made Travis furious. "You just don't get it," Travis spat, and without warning, he lunged. The moment moved in slow motion for everyone else, but for Blake it was instinct, like breathing. Blake shifted. Not a flinch, not a shuffle. A precise move, practiced to perfection. He slid out of the booth in one fluid motion, grabbing Travis's wrist mid-swing and redirecting his force. The biker stumbled forward, caught off guard. Before he could react, Blake twisted Travis's arm behind his back, guiding him straight into the table. A loud thud echoed through the diner as the biker's chest slammed into the laminate surface. One down. The others hesitated, startled. Blake released Travis, letting him crumble to the floor, groaning. He turned toward the others, his eyes calm but firm. "You don't want this," he said softly, almost like advice. But bikers don't back down. Not when there's an audience. The wiry man with stringy hair was next. He charged with a yell, fists swinging wildly. Blake sidestepped him like water flowing around a rock, then planted an elbow into the man's gut. The biker wheezed, folding over as Blake used his momentum to send him sprawling into a chair. 2 down. The remaining 3 bikers moved together now, realizing this wasn't a bar fight, this was something else. A sharp sense of panic replaced their bravado, but it was too late. The largest of them grabbed for Blake's shoulder. A mistake. Blake turned sharply, trapping the man's arm and dropping him to the floor with a clean sweep of his leg. Before the biker could react, Blake knelt, pressing a knee into his back and whispered, "Stay down." The man froze. Gasping for air, the biker didn't move. 3 down. Another came at Isaac from behind, wielding a chair. The attack was sloppy, desperate. Isaac ducked effortlessly, rising to grab the chair and yank it free from the biker's hands. The man stumbled back off balance, and Isaac closed the distance with a controlled shove, sending him into a booth where he collapsed in a heap. 4 down. The last biker hesitated, eyes wide, hands trembling. He looked around at his friends, bruised, broken, humiliated. And then he looked at Isaac, who hadn't even broken a sweat. Isaac tilted his head slightly, a silent question. "You're done?" The biker swallowed hard, then turned and bolted for the door. The bell above it jingled wildly as he fled into the parking lot. 5 down. The diner went still. Isaac exhaled, adjusting his baseball cap as he glanced at the mess. The bikers groaned from the floor, too shocked or winded to get up. The man, still slumped over the table, looked up with a mixture of pain and disbelief. Isaac looked him in the eyes and said softly, "I told you to back off." The silence that followed was deafening. But it wasn't the fight people would remember. It was what came next. The diner sat frozen. Nobody moved. The silence felt heavier than the fight itself. The waitress stood behind the counter, her hand still on the phone she never got the chance to use. The cook peeked through the kitchen window, eyes wide, his spatula hanging uselessly in his hand. Isaac straightened up, his breathing steady, his posture relaxed. If you hadn't seen what just happened, you'd think he'd simply finished tying his shoe. The man groaned as he pushed himself halfway up, bruised pride far worse than his aching ribs. "What the hell?" "Who are you?" he muttered, his voice a mix of pain and confusion. Isaac looked down at him, his face calm, unreadable. He didn't smirk, he didn't gloat. "Just a guy getting lunch," he said quietly. The biker glared at him through bloodshot eyes. "You ain't normal. What the hell are you?" Isaac looked around the diner. The eyes on him weren't filled with fear, they were filled with awe, respect. People weren't used to seeing someone that calm, that capable. He sighed softly and shook his head. "You don't want to know." The wiry biker, still slumped against a chair, coughed out, "You military or something?" Isaac didn't answer. He turned away from them, heading back to his booth. His plate was still there, burger and fries untouched, the coffee cup half full. He picked up a fry and took a bite as if the last 5 minutes hadn't happened. The waitress finally moved, stepping forward cautiously, her voice shaky. "Sir? Are you okay?" Isaac looked up and gave her a soft smile. "I'm fine, ma'am." He blinked, stunned by how polite he sounded after what he'd just done. She glanced at the bikers sprawled across the floor, then back at him. I'll get you a fresh burger." "No need," Isaac replied. "This one's just fine." A man, sitting at the far booth, someone's grandfather with a farmer's tan and calloused hands, muttered, "I ain't never seen anything like that before." Isaac ignored the whispers spreading through the room. He knew what they were thinking. A calm man in a world full of noise stands out. People remember that. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a few bills, placing them neatly under the edge of his plate. Then he rose from the booth. The sound of his boots was the only noise in the room as he walked toward the door. The waitress watched him go. "Wait," she called after him. "Who are you really?" Isaac paused with his hand on the door. He glanced back at her and held her gaze for just a second longer than expected. "Just a guy who knows how to finish his lunch," he said with a faint smile. Then he stepped outside, the bell above the door jingling faintly as it closed behind him. Outside, the gravel crunched under Isaac's boots as he made his way back to his truck. The biker who had fled earlier stood near his motorcycle, staring at him in shock. He didn't say a word. He just stepped aside as Isaac climbed into his truck. The engine roared to life, the sound breaking the stillness that had gripped the parking lot. Isaac put the truck in gear, glanced once in the rearview mirror at the diner and the people still standing inside watching him leave, then drove off down the empty road. The bikers would recover, bruises would fade, but the lesson would stick. You don't judge a man by how he looks, how he talks, or where he comes from. Sometimes the quiet ones are the ones you should never test. But for the people in that diner, the story wasn't over, it was just beginning. The small diner on Route 66 would never be the same. Word spread quickly, a story like this one that people would tell their friends, family, and co-workers. It grew with each retelling. "Yeah, I was there," someone would say. "The guy barely moved, took those bikers apart like he was tying his shoes, didn't even break a sweat." Another would add, "He was calm the whole time, like he didn't even see them as a threat." The waitress told her version too, eyes wide as she described the stranger's stillness, his precision. "I asked him who he was," she'd say. "And you know what he told me? Just a guy getting lunch." For the bikers, the lesson was even harder. The bruises would heal, but the humiliation lingered. Travis, the loudest of them all, was the quietest for weeks afterward. Every time someone teased him about the diner, he'd go red in the face and mutter, "Forget about it." But deep down, he wouldn't forget. None of them would. That day shattered their arrogance. It taught them that strength isn't in numbers or in how loud you are. Sometimes it's in knowing you can, but choosing not to until there's no other option. And for Malik, he didn't care about the stories. He didn't want recognition. To him it was simple. You treat people with respect, you mind your business, and if someone crosses the line, you handle it. Not with anger, but with control. Somewhere down that lonely stretch of highway, Malik drove on. The miles passed like whispers, the sun dipping low on the horizon. He wasn't thinking about the diner anymore or the bikers. He thought about his time in the military, the missions no one would ever hear about, the people he protected even when they didn't know they needed protecting. That's what mattered to him. Not the noise, not the ego, just the job. As he drove, a tune played faintly on the old radio, the kind of song that made the road feel endless and free. A few miles later, Malik pulled off to another small roadside spot, this time a gas station. He stepped out, stretched his legs, and grabbed a bottle of water from inside. The cashier, a teenage kid with headphones dangling around his neck, glanced up as Malik approached the counter. "You headed somewhere important?" the kid asked, making conversation. Malik smiled faintly, tossing a few bills on the counter. "Nope, just passing through." The kid nodded, his eyes catching something in Malik's stance. "You military or something?" Malik paused for half a second, then shrugged. "Just a guy getting water." He stepped back outside, water in hand, and climbed into his truck. As he pulled back onto the road, the cashier watched through the window, feeling something he couldn't quite describe. Respect, maybe, or curiosity. And like that, Malik was gone. Another town, another stretch of road. He didn't need recognition, didn't want it. But for everyone he left behind, his quiet strength spoke volumes. A reminder that you don't need to shout to be powerful. You don't need to prove yourself to anyone. Sometimes the strongest people are the ones who let their actions do the talking. Respect isn't earned through loud words or intimidation. It's earned through control, composure, and quiet strength. The people who seem the calmest are often the ones who fought the hardest battles. Never judge someone by what you think you see. If this story resonated with you, Share it with someone who needs to hear this lesson, and don't forget to subscribe for more powerful stories that remind us what really matters in life.